Hey everybody, Kris Gethin here. Now, if you're over the age of 35, like myself, your enzyme levels have already begun to decline. Enzymes are the workhorses of digestion. They break down your food into usable macro and micronutrients. Now, research shows that the time that someone hits 65 years old, their saliva and pancreatic secretions, both of which involved in enzyme activity, have declined by as much as 50%. Now, if you've looked at my Instagram posts, my stories, you'll notice that quite often if I'm eating out, if I'm having a steak or something like that, I am eating my Masszymes by Bioptimizers. Now, the reason why I take this is because it has over 102% more proteins than the nearest competitor and 300 to 500 more per serving the most popular brands. Now, this is crucial because as us being bodybuilders or athletes, we require a lot of protein. And it isn't just about how much you eat, it's always how much you absorb. So you got to break it down. So not only does the Masszymes contain more proteins, it also contains 13 additional enzymes, including lipase for fat digestion, which work at a very high pH level from 2 to 12. In other words, at every state of digestion. So you can try this right now today, risk-free. They're 365 day, let me get that right, 365 day full money back guarantee is the gold standard. So if you feel that Masszymes are going to help you upgrade your digestion like mine and power through your food, their support team will give you a no question asked refund. And when you go to masszymes.com/Kris20, be sure to enter that coupon code Kris20 to receive a 20% discount off that order. All right, everybody. Kris Gethin here. Welcome to the Knowledge and Mileage podcast. We are here in LA at a co-working space. Fantastic little joint that we've got here. And I have a fantastic guest with me. I feel like it's been, have you seen the documentary on Bill Murray recently? There's a couple of filmmakers that have followed all these stories of Bill Murray. And they're like, is it true? He shows up at people's places and just does the washing up, goes to a party, ends up serving beers. That's what I feel like it's been.
Bill, isn't he the actor from What About Bob?
Yeah.
That guy?
Yeah.
I don't know many movies or TVs, and I don't watch documentaries.
This is a fun documentary, and it's usually on the plane. It's been on the plane for the past month. I can't remember, maybe United or something like that. I'd suggest you check it out.
Okay, I'll try. I have a hard time parking my... What I do when people say you got to watch this documentary is I send it to my assistant and she converts it into MP3, and then I listen to documentaries while I'm walking or hiking or...
It'd be a good one to listen to.
You get about 80% of what, you miss out on some of the cinematography.
Yeah.
But that's how I digest documentaries is I'll just convert them into audio.
Got it.
Yeah,
so this filmmaker is just chasing all these stories because he does these overly normal things as a famous actor, and it's quite fun. I feel it's kind of the same with you, Ben. Like, I've been following you for many years, started with the Ironman triathlon because that's what I got into, so I started watching your YouTube videos in that direction first, and then I meet other people that, oh yeah, Ben's my boy, a lot of people that I know, but I've never actually met you, even though you're just a stone throw away from me. So Ben Greenfield, everybody, just in case you were wondering.
That's funny you say that about the Ironman triathlon videos. I shot so many, like every time I'd pack my bike or pack my bag or make some new smoothie for the bike ride, I would just flip on the video camera, and I think I kind of became like one of the go-to guys for Ironman just because I loved to race Ironman. I did it for a decade, but I'd just flip on the camera whenever I'd do anything related to meal prep. Or in 2013, I began to get into this thing called ketosis because I was very curious about how it could give the liver or the diaphragm or the heart or the brain extra fuel during endurance.
And you used to double
fuel.
Experiment
with that, and as you know, kind of like two sports in which you need to do a lot of so-called hacking are bodybuilding and triathlon. especially something like Ironman, because you're trying to squeeze every last drop of optimization out of the body, the brain, or both. So yeah, there was a great deal of experimentation that went on during those 10 years, and it was a really good way to take. I'd graduated from college. I had a master's degree in exercise physiology and biomechanics, and I just, after a brief foray in bodybuilding, used my anatomy as a playground to figure out all of these different things and experiment with, what they call the fourth discipline of triathlon, right? There's swim, bike, run, and eating. And it's not, neither that nor bodybuilding, I think, are very healthy sports. Especially when it comes to longevity.
Yeah, it comes to the extreme.
You learn a lot about fueling the body, about recovery, about going for long periods of time, and so it was an interesting part of my life.
Yeah, those videos are very, very interesting because a lot of the time if you haven't done it, you make so many mistakes on that first occasion. So I didn't want to use my first event as any mistake, so I got to learn exactly how to lay out my transition, what I should have at what particular time. And it was really good. I really geeked out on those videos.
Dialed down to a T, all the way down to hanging a tiny pink balloon from your transition area, so when you're running up out of the water and your heart rate's going 170 beats per minute, you know where your bicycle is. Everything, like you have the little, like the shoes are lined with the Vaseline or the anti-friction cream, so your feet slide in quicker, and you've got the elastic shoelaces on the shoes, so you don't have to stop the timing. Seconds start to count. You think about seconds in that event. So yeah, it's a lot of optimization.
Let me ask you, if that didn't have an adverse effect on your longevity, is that something that you'd still participate in, or it just takes up too much time?
It takes up too much time. It is so I have nothing against climbing your own personal Mount Everest, going out and doing a Spartan or a triathlon or a CrossFit competition or a fitness competition or whatever the case may be. But the older I get, the more I crave my fitness being functional, right? Something that I'm actually doing that feels like I'm getting more than a medal or crossing the finish line or stoking of the ego. So for me, a big part of that has turned to hunting and fishing. Right, because it's cool. I can bring back meat to my family. I can cook up a tasty parrotfish after a day of spearfishing, which it might involve 6 hours out there, getting on the wetsuit and going underwater with the gun and diving, coming back up and driving back, and it takes up just as much time often as training. The same for shooting the bow, right? A lot of times that's even more than an Ironman triathlon. You're out in the Colorado high country or the base of the volcanoes in Hawaii, sometimes for 5 to 7 days at a time, getting your meat and belly crawling and, walking 70 miles over several days and, practicing your shots each morning and arriving home exhausted each night. But I would say if anything scratches the itch of feeling truly satisfied with your movement or your fitnessing, it would be that aspect of hunting and fishing. So that's what I've kind of pivoted towards more. Ironman triathlon, it takes up a lot of time, but for me it wasn't the time as much as feeling like it's just, it became slightly empty, the pursuit of it. I felt as though it was almost too selfish, right? Just exercising for the sake of crossing the finish line or getting to Kona or getting yet another medal. And sure, you can race for charity, right? You can race to raise money for kids or whatever the case may be.
Or race to finish.
Yeah, but even that, like I feel more fulfilled with a lot more of these functional activities now.
And do you feel that you're probably a little too competitive and anything just slightly can go wrong, and it just, you could be preparing for one of those events for 12 months. You could be traveling to Hong Kong or wherever for that event, and then all it takes is one thing.
You have your tire change, usually only one, maybe two of them. Something gets punctured. All of a sudden, you're 15 minutes off the back of the pack on the bike, and for the next 8 hours, all you're thinking is, well, shit, I'll finish the race, but I'm not going to get the time that I wanted, or finish with the placing that I wanted, or qualify for Kona, or whatever the case may be. So that's a tricky part of racing too, is you put your life into this thing for months at a time, and then one tiny thing goes wrong. But that's part of the appeal of it too. Like if it was easy and everything just went like clockwork, it'd be bad business for a corporation like Ironman Triathlon, right? Because one big thing is people finish the race. This happened to me over and over again. You draw into this loop, right? And there are people who are 50, 60 years old on their, 25th or 30th or 40th Ironman Triathlon, still trying to qualify for Kona, or still in search for that perfect race that frankly is rarely going to happen. And you finish the race, and then the next morning you know that you can go write your $800 check to Ironman to sign up for the next one, to give you a chance to get that perfect race. And you get sucked into this vicious loop that it gets kind of selfish. It really does, but it's so easy for us to put our egos on a pedestal and just swim and bike and run our asses off all day long, just looking for that next perfect race.
And speaking of selfish, like prior to Ironman, you were doing quite the opposite. You're actually, and this is going to appeal to a lot of my listeners, is bodybuilding. You were a competitive bodybuilder for a while. Of course, a lot of people suggest that can be a selfish sport as well, because not only are you, again, preparing for a contest, which could be 1 year away, but you have to live that lifestyle 24/7.
Very narcissistic. Very
Eating the 6 meals.
narcissistic. Weigh everything out. Keep track of every tiny shred of calories. Know if your banana's 70 calories or 80 calories, and how many cans of tuna fish you can eat at night. And you got all your stacks, your creatine and your nitric oxide. For me, it was I was poor when I was a bodybuilder, so it was pretty much creatine, protein. I did a little bit of nitric oxide, and then just tuna fish and cheap, top sirloin steak whenever I get my hands on. It's a very, very narcissistic and somewhat selfish sport as well, and can be somewhat non-functional, as I think many bodybuilders are aware of. But again, I have nothing against scratching that itch, like climbing that mountain if that's your mountain. And I learned a lot in bodybuilding too. I learned a lot about nutrition. A lot about macros, a lot about supplementation, a lot about muscle building and fat loss and dehydration and and losing weight and gaining weight. But it is kind of selfish, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But those are the similarities. But how does somebody transition from bodybuilding, where you generally have to be bigger, to Ironman Triathlon, where you have to be a lot smaller? How did you just go from one extreme to the next?
I did a lot of fasted training sessions, especially on the bike, which seems to be the easiest sport to go in a fasted state. So I catabolized a lot of muscle.
But what was that mental transition?
Long, fasted workouts.
What made you go from one to the other?
I went and watched an Ironman Triathlon.
Oh, that was
in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I saw it. I saw the people crossing the finish line. It just looked intriguing. The whole science of the bicycle and the technology of the swim wetsuit. It very much appealed to the geek in me. It was. I tend to jump into new activities with fervor and an intense sense of curiosity, right? And so I've gone from I went from competitive tennis, and then I played water polo, and then got into bodybuilding, and then transitioned into Ironman, and then got into obstacle course racing, and and then bow hunting and spearfishing, and who knows, 2 years from now it could be speed golf, but I like to be a renaissance man when it comes to sport, and trying a lot of new things. So, but for me, it was going to an Ironman and seeing the people looking so happy as they crossed that finish line with a big smile on their faces, and me just thinking, I can do this. Mm-hmm. I want to try it.
Yeah. So, I'd been personally competing in natural drug-free bodybuilding for 10 years. I retired from that in 2009. But I love to train. Training is very therapeutic for me. And then I decided, because I'm the kind of person that did cardio every day, most important muscle being your heart. And, the typical bodybuilding thought is that you shouldn't do cardio, you will wither away. So I thought, well, you know what, I'm going to prove to people, providing that you supplement and eat the correct way, that you can do both. So yeah. I did my first Ironman triathlon at Coeur d'Alene. I did the 70.3, then I did the full within 6 months, and I kept my 220 pounds of size. Of course, I wasn't going out and eating bars and gels. I basically had backpacks of food when I was going out and training, and I was supplementing and eating more so like a bodybuilder, however, doing triathlon training, but I would use, let's say, a leg workout to pre-fatigue my legs before I went out for a run. Mm-hmm. So I didn't have to run as long. Of course, I wasn't competing at the level that you did, but I just wanted people to understand, especially from my realms, that you can do some form of cardiovascular.
Yeah, that was my entire approach. And remind me, when you were talking about the heart, I literally just last night got the results of something I did through Health Nucleus called a full body MRI. Remind me if we can, because I just reached into my bag and grabbed the reports. What I've learned about my heart and what it's done.
Training.
Yeah, so I'll get to that momentarily. But when it comes to training, I adopted a very similar kind of time-saving approach. Built all my training around high-intensity interval training, right? So instead of doing 4x1000 in the pool, it'd be very quick, like a 50, or not even a 50, more like a 25x25, at a super intense sprint pace. And a lot of my bicycle workouts were done indoors on something called a CompuTrainer, which allows you to quantify your wattage very quick in and out, like Sufferfests on the bicycle, where you just have a quick 40-minute high-intensity workout, almost like a spin class, but you spend very little amount of time just, riding your bicycle for hours and hours outside. And for my runs, I did a lot of, for example, there was a program I used called Runnervals, which was just like 30 to 40 minutes on the treadmill where, workout might be 10 sets of 30-second sprints at a 10% incline with 30 seconds recovery between each. I did a lot of that, and that was actually that was really how I retired from owning personal training studios and gyms, which is what I did for several years after I graduated. Was I wove together all of these things that I was doing to prepare for Ironman triathlon and still have time left over for my career and for hobbies and for a social life and for my family. I spent 6 months kind of moonlighting as I was working as a personal trainer, weaving this whole program together. Like, how do you actually train and do well in an Ironman triathlon on limited time? And I hired my first virtual assistant from the Philippines to hunt down the contact details of all the different triathlon clubs and triathlon coaches across the U.S. And I signed up for an affiliate account through this company called ClickBank and learned how to do affiliate marketing so other people could sell this for me and make a little piece of the pie. And the year that I launched this, I launched it during the week of Ironman Hawaii, because I figured my logic was a lot of people are going to be like, going to the search engine and Googling, Ironman triathlon or Ironman Hawaii. So I'd SEO all my articles and, everything that was in the funnel for people to buy this program. I called it the Triathlon Dominator. And the week of Ironman Hawaii, I put everything live. At that point, I'd put a couple of little ebooks online. And so I had a credit card processing service. I had a little newsletter. I had the ability to engage in e-commerce. I made about $47,000 in that week just selling this package. It was a $97 to get the digital version. Then I used this company in Texas called Disc that would fulfill for me and print a package of CDs and booklets that people could get shipped to their house. That was $197, and that was the very first kind of proper information product and proper launch that I did. Made for me, what I was basically making in like 7 or 8 months as a personal trainer in 1 week. And the light bulb went on for me, and I was like, dude, that was not that difficult. I took my knowledge, stuff I love to do anyways, I put it out there, made it available for people to buy, and I just started rinsing, washing, and repeating. I did a full program for fixing your knees. I did a follow-up program called Try Ripped, which basically taught you how to gain muscle and build a nice body while also competing for triathlon. I did what else did I have? I had like a nutrition program I produced that was basically like a 3-phase clean eating protocol that kind of led into more varied nutrition. I forget, that was called the Rev Diet. Just started doing tons of information products, and essentially, 6 months in, sold all my personal training equipment and moved my clients on to other trainers and started living at home, homeschooling my kids, and authoring. I started a podcast to be able to kind of sell and market more of these products. But that was what initially started it, was just using that approach, right, of high intensity interval training and weight training for triathlon to save time rather than beating yourself up with 40 hours a week of training, and created an information product. And that was essentially how I kind of got into what I do now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. So when, I remember actually being on one of my runs, because I actually did an ultra marathon during that time of doing the Ironman as well. I thought, well, hey, I've got my fitness up, I'm also doing an ultra marathon as well. And I remember listening I have the hard copy and the audio version of your Beyond training. I remember listening in there where I think you put some reference to maybe a particular individual studies where these runners were actually getting scarring of the heart and basically shortening their lifespan by doing these extreme sort of these sports. Was it that kind of halted you from saying, you know what, I'm probably not going to pursue Ironman training or something that's extensive such as that, or bodybuilding, other than the time factor, because it could be potentially shortening my lifespan?
It was a cluster of similar variables, meaning that I started getting into the realm of self-quantification, which I found intriguing. I started to do blood work. My inflammatory markers were through the roof, elements like HSCRP and homocysteine and fibrinogen. My blood glucose and my insulin reflected pre-diabetes, right? Even though I was a super fit athlete, cortisol levels were through the roof. Sex hormone binding globulin, which binds up your bioavailable hormones and renders them essentially unavailable, was very high as well, because nature doesn't want you to have babies when you're running from a lion all day long. My testosterone was nearly hypogonadal. My thyroid was out of whack. And I just had this, oh shit moment. I'm healthy, but I'm not healthy, bro. Like I look good in spandex, but I'm freaking dying on the inside. That led me to write Beyond Training, which really is exactly what the name implies. Everything that goes beyond training to take care of one's body, right? I had small intestine bacterial overgrowth, so I started writing about and researching the gut and the endocrine system, and my sleep was off. I used to have to take Valium after a day of training to settle my body down from all the gels with the caffeine and the sugar. I started to look into, like I mentioned, ketosis as a way to mitigate a lot of this carbohydrate and sugar intake that I was getting in. That definitely impacted my decision to kind of back off a lot of the more masochistic endurance activities. I also got an ultrasound echocardiogram, which showed that I had, probably due to both bodybuilding and cardio, cardiomegaly, right? Athlete's heart, very, very large left ventricle. This full body MRI, which I'm still, I got the full body MRI to be able to look at. Essentially, I was very curious about whether I'd have like little, the things that take a person out fast: pituitary tumor, pancreatic tumor, a lung mass, mass in the kidney. Like the full body MRI can really tell you a lot about those things. It's essentially a scan of your entire body, brain volume, areas of damage to the brain, colon health, and so my results here reflect what I noted on that ultrasound echocardiogram, and the doctor, if I can find the page in here, showed it to me. I mean, my heart is just freaking huge due to all that training. I don't know what page it's on. And I also got an EKG, an exercise EKG, and my heart displayed what a lot of these endurance athletes and bodybuilders' hearts display at high intensity: paraventricular contractions, electrical abnormalities in the heart related to excess sympathetic nervous system fight and flight activity, right? So my cardiovascular system, despite me having an aerobic engine that could go for days, was beat up, stressed out, and overworked. Cardiomegaly is something that a lot of people have. It's not going to cause you to die of a heart attack during the swim of a triathlon by itself, but when combined with high amounts of cortisol, electrolyte and mineral depletion, poor night of sleep the night before the race, being in 10 different cities across the globe in the 3 months leading up to an event, and leading that typical executive CEO, hard-charging, high-achieving-esque lifestyle combined with Ironman, you pair that with cardiomegaly or an enlarged heart, and you have a recipe for a cardiovascular incident during exercise. The classic, marathoner who drops dead of a heart attack during exercise. That was another thing was this ultrasound echocardiogram and exercise EKG, which reflected heart issues. So just this cluster of factors that suggested to me that, man, maybe I should rethink what being healthy and living a long time really is. And then there's a doctor named Dr. James O'Keefe who has looked at kind of the law of diminishing returns when it comes to exercise, particularly endurance exercise. And you see atherosclerotic plaque formation and arterial stiffness occur once you've reached a certain threshold of exercise. And in most people, it's about 90 minutes of aerobic exercise which many Ironman triathletes are exceeding every day, or 60 minutes of intense exercise, which many, 2-a-day CrossFitters or even a triathlete who's doing a hard swim in the morning and a hard bike ride in the afternoon or the evening is also experiencing. So, I mean, dude, when we look at a lot of these blue zones, right, areas where people are living a disproportionately long period of time, where there's a lot of these so-called centenarians, people who are above 100, you don't see many gyms or boxes or races or anything of the nature. You see low-level physical activity throughout the day, typically outdoors, in nature. People don't finish their workday and feel like they need to go to the gym. Right? What we experience as our pressure to exercise at the beginning or the end of the day is really a fabrication of a post-industrial era in which we're relegated to sitting on our asses in many cases in a shared workspace like this, or a cubicle, or at home, or whatever the case may be, and we still have to somehow scratch that primal urge to move, right? And so what used to be relegated to the realm of gladiators and professional athletes and warriors who, would defend cities or compete in the Olympics or whatever the case may be, for the honor of their country for a living, the housewife and the executive and whatever, they feel the pressure to be doing those same things because that's what society has come to expect of us, and that's almost what we naturally want to do after we've been sitting on our asses all day. I get that sounds unfair. Like, not a lot of people have a job as a hunter, gatherer, gardener, clearing trails out in the wilderness, or planting fruit trees that dictates that they don't need to exercise at the end of the day. But what I say is, question societal norms, right? Hack your environment to enable yourself to simulate what a hunter-gatherer type of exercise scenario would look like, right? Get a walking treadmill at your office, plant a kettlebell in your cubicle, and hang a pull-up bar from the door of the office. I've got a hex bar always loaded up with weights in the room right next door to my office in the basement. Whenever I take my phone calls, I save them all for the afternoon, so I can go outside and walk and take all my phone calls in the afternoon while I'm ambulating. So by the time you've gotten to the end of the day, exercise is an option because you've just been kind of moving all day long. And sure, if what makes you happy and fulfilled is to do a Spartan race or an Ironman triathlon or a bodybuilding competition or whatever, yeah, you got to get your ass into a gym or, out pounding the pavement or whatever. But don't fool yourself into thinking that's necessary to live a long time or to be healthy or to lose fat or to optimize your blood and biomarkers. And furthermore, don't feel as though that's what it takes to live a long time, right? Because again, when we look at the blue zones, it's love, life, relationships, family dinners, gratitude, meditation, the spiritual disciplines of prayer and worship and silence and solitude. It's eating a diet that's rich in a wide variety of wild plants and herbs and spices. It's eating a lot of legumes and slow fermented carbohydrates and things that don't cause the blood sugar to rise. It's being outdoors in the sunshine. There are a cluster of variables that we see over and over again in many of these blue zones, but nary a time do you see exercise in the way that we've created exercise to be this formal punishment that you engage in at the beginning or the end of the day.
Yeah, it's scheduled, and it's probably going to get worse before it gets better, especially when you look at Instagram, instant gratification. Everything's very visual now from what we see, and people gravitate towards that without, putting in the sacrifice before seeing the success.
Yeah.
And how do you make both of them work? As I said, a lot of my listeners are from the quote-unquote bodybuilding background. Maybe they don't compete, but they want to have a good physique. Maybe they want to aspire to that bodybuilding lifestyle or Ironman triathlon or Spartan. How do you combine the both? This is my battle. I try to quantify everything. I'll fast like once a week. Last year I was fasting 5 times a week, following like a cyclical ketogenic diet, very similar to what you follow. But now I'm getting back into the realms of putting on muscle. This is my comeback sort of thing. How do I ensure that I'm not shortening my telomeres? How do I ensure that I'm not scarring my heart so I have any of these issues? And I want to increase my longevity, my health span, whilst participating in what would be deemed as like a typical athletic lifestyle. With a meal frequency.
Yes, it's an involved question, but, and of course the exercise sessions themselves would be very, very sport and goal specific. So exercise aside, some of the main variables that you want to weave in would be either the things that we see the blue zones doing, or things that optimize the health of your mitochondria specifically that don't necessarily involve exercise. The best way I can couch that is to say that you can get fit, so to speak, in terms of cellular fitness and health without a formal exercise session. So some of those things would be optimizing variables in your life like air, light, water, and electricity. Installing a HEPA air filter in your home or your office so you're breathing really clean, pure air that allows you to not have to be exposed to all the toxins and molds and fungi that tend to cause you to fight an uphill battle when it comes to lung health or cardiovascular health.
Or mental health.
Yeah, Googling the NASA clean air study where you can get a list of a dozen or so houseplants that you can keep around the house that act as bioremediants like English ivy and peace lily and these things that clean the air for you. Getting an essential oil diffuser that allows you to diffuse these healing oils, the same thing you get if you were out walking in the forest, dissolve cinnamon and peppermint and rosemary and other cognitively stimulating oils in the office or in the gym and in the bedroom to optimize sleep and recovery, oils like lavender or bergamot or chamomile or rose. So be aware of air because you're sucking it in all day long. Right, so that's a variable you can pay attention to that directly impacts your fitness. Another one would be water, right? Which you probably, shoveling water into your gaping maw 8 to 10 times a day. You're showering in it. We know that your skin is a mouth, right? That's a delivery mechanism for pharmaceuticals is lotions and creams. It's a very efficient delivery mechanism. And if you're not cognizant of and paying attention to the health of the water that you put into your body, that's another area that you can optimize. You can get a water filter. You can use reverse osmosis. You can, if you travel a lot, travel with a tiny little cheap shower head filter that you get off of Amazon. You begin to be aware of the water because when you think about the cells and the fact that they operate based on an electrochemical gradient across the cell membrane and a negative millivolt potential inside the cell, and that your mitochondria's electron transport chain relies upon proper electricity, while the way that your body stays charged, so to speak, like a battery, is via movement of water molecules, and those rely upon minerals. So not only do you want clean water, but you want water that's mineral rich. Like, I've got a bottle of Pellegrino here. I put, pinches of sea salt into my water throughout the day. If I'm training hard, I'll even drink like trace liquid minerals, liquid droppers that you can, like there's a company called AquaTrue I get those from, or there's another company called Quicksilver Scientific that does like this hypertonic mineral solution that tastes like seawater. But clean water and water that's mineral rich, in addition to paying attention to the health of your air, is another important variable. And then when it comes to light, your body also responds very, very significantly to the type of light that you're exposed to. We even know in this word is silly and I think overused, but in the biohacking sector, a lot of people are using infrared lights or near and far infrared light or these panels like photobiomodulation panels that expose the body to infrared light. And it is indeed true that the mitochondria, there's part of the electron transport chain called cytochrome C oxidase, and it responds very favorably in terms of ATP production and mitochondrial biogenesis to light exposure. Right, so you can stand in front of one of these light panels or use an infrared sauna, but of course you can also just get out into the frickin' sunshine on a daily basis, preferably as much as you can earlier in the day, so you optimize your circadian rhythms. And in addition to that, from an omission standpoint, walk around your house, your office, and you look and you see bright fluorescent lights that just bombard you all day long. It's an imperceptible flicker that you can see, kind of like those old school video cameras where you could video your TV and you could see it flickering, but you can't see it unless you're looking at it through the video camera based on the feed rate into the camera. Very similar with this imperceptible flicker that we see from LED and fluorescent light. Now, if you're in a mall or you're in a doctor's office or you're in a co-working space, you may not have the option to change out the light bulbs, right? You can't walk into Banana Republic and tell them you're going to shop there and they need to change their lighting. But you can wear blue light blocking glasses. I own 2 pairs, like a very dark kind of reddish pair for the evening and kind of a clear pair that I can wear during the day. In your own home, in your office, you can replace bulbs with as natural a form of lighting as possible, and that would be incandescent. Incandescent bulbs, that's the only thing that's in my house, clear incandescent in the areas where, like the living room or the kitchen where I want more light, and in the bedroom it's just red incandescent bulb, right, which is very favorable for my circadian rhythm and my sleep architecture. Right?
So is there a particular brand for that, or people will just
No, you can just search for incandescent. They're kind of power hogs, meaning your electricity bill will go up slightly, but in my opinion it's relatively insignificant, and the health benefits are worth it. The sleep benefits, the cognitive benefits, the decrease in brain fog in the afternoon, etc. It's surprising how much modern light bombards us all day long, and we're kind of unaware, or we don't pay attention to that in the same way we don't pay attention to water or to air. So light is important, and I even do things with my screens. Like I have a software program called Iris installed on my laptop that will dim the screen in the evenings, but it also reduces the flicker. It reduces what's called the temperature of the screen. So by the end of the day, you don't feel as though your eyes have just been bombarded with this bothersome stimulus during the day. On my TV at home, I have something called a drift box, which reduces all blue light from the TV in case I want to watch something in the evening but still be able to sleep afterwards. So you can do a lot of cool things with light. I have an article on my website called Sunlight Makes You Skinny, Blue Light Makes You Fat, in which I delve into a lot of these things, because I took a pretty deep dive into light a couple of years ago because I really wanted to optimize that in my environment, in addition to air and water. And then finally, there's electricity, right? Again, we live in this modern post-industrial era where we've got 5G, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, the Internet of Things. Who knows, as we're sitting here in this co-working space in LA, and anybody knows if they flip on their phone, turn on the Wi-Fi, how many different Wi-Fi signals there are bouncing around. Again, the human body is a battery. You can read a book like The Body Electric by Dr. Robert Becker if you really want to wrap your head around how much the body relies upon electrical signals to be able to communicate, to be able to allow the mitochondria to produce ATP. There's some evidence that Wi-Fi and even hefty amounts of Bluetooth to a certain extent, and certainly 5G and 4G and all our appliances, they can affect this. I had a building biologist come through my home, and that's technically what they're called, a building biologist. They go through your home with meters, and they measure how much you're getting exposed to, which cell phone towers are kind of bombarding your home, and then you can make little changes. For example, you can purchase for $30 a digital wall timer from Amazon. That's what your Wi-Fi router would be plugged into. And you can time it. So just turn your router off at 10 p.m. and turn it back on at 6 a.m. So at least during your night of sleep, for the full third of your life, you're not getting bombarded with Wi-Fi. If you are not using your phone and it's in your pocket and you're out on a walk or in a workout session, there's absolutely no reason that it shouldn't be in airplane mode. If I have something I'm going to listen to and I'm going to listen to it through my phone, I'll use Overcast or Apple Podcasts or whatever, but I download the episode first, right? So it's on my phone. I don't have to be connected while I'm exercising or in a sauna or whatever. In my own home, I even use Ethernet cable when I want to work. So I literally just have Ethernet cables in the home. Every room you walk into, you can just plug the Ethernet cable into the computer, and it's kind of a pain in the ass at first, doing that instead of just connecting straight to the Wi-Fi. But it just feels clean, and you sleep better, and you're not bombarded by these signals all the time. So air, light, water, and electricity are 4 things that you can pay attention to be able to optimize your fitness and your mitochondrial genesis without, like nothing I just talked about involved a formal exercise session or modifying your workout. And then there are also things that I think athletes should be aware of, or exercise enthusiasts should be aware of, that scratch the itch of making your body better without necessarily beating your body up. And for that, it would be anything that involves hormesis, right? Small amounts of things that would kill you in large doses, being healthy for you and inducing cellular resilience and cellular fitness in smaller doses. I named one, sunlight, right? We all know if you stay out in the sun for a long time, it's radiation and you'll get burnt, but brief forays out into sunlight are fantastic for your mitochondria. I'm a huge fan of heat and cold. Right, long-term exposure to saunas, we know it builds new red blood cells. It can simulate illegal performance-enhancing blood doping if you go and sit in a sauna for 30 minutes after a workout. It causes a dump of nitric oxide into the bloodstream. It induces formation of new capillaries and elastin and collagen health. And so, yeah, exactly. Cold, the same thing. Nitric oxide production, vagal nerve tone, better balance of the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. There's no reason you can't choose a couple of days of the week in which you'd normally be beating yourself up because you feel that urge to go out and do something, and instead do a 30-minute sauna session. And then, for example, one workout I'll give to my athletes or the people I coach is a 3x3 with a cold tub or a cold pool, where you do 3 minutes of breath work, then you get into the cold pool for 3 minutes, then you go back and do 3 minutes of breath work, then back into the cold pool for 3 minutes. And these type of things don't involve picking up weights or causing eccentric muscle tissue damage or exhausting glycogen levels through going out on a run or a swim or a bike ride, but they still induce fitness because they're mild hormetic stressors. You could finally even say the same thing for capsaicin and ginger and garlic and thyme and rosemary and oregano and a lot of these herbs and spices that we see a lot of the blue zones using. And sure, it's not going to, if you're trying to get an Olympic gold medal or go from 4% body fat to 3% body fat, it's not as though putting, rosemary and thyme in a curry for dinner is going to really move the dial that much. But for general cellular resistance, for general mitochondrial health and cellular health, using a wide variety of wild plants and herbs and spices just constantly subjects your body to these mild hormetic stressors, these built-in plant defense mechanisms that allow your body to become stronger. So ultimately, I know it's a long reply to your question, but you need to weave in all these variables that especially athletes and exercise enthusiasts tend to neglect in favor of purely focusing on movement and macros, right? So completely agnostic of and regardless of the type of workout that you're going to do, because we could talk about periodization and sport-specific programs until we're blue in the face. You have to pay attention to these environmental variables and to different ways to make your body fit without a formal exercise session.
Yeah. And and not only that, with the hot and cold therapy, giving you those benefits, I find that it's just another form of discipline that gives you a sense of empowerment that can transcend into other areas of your life. By not switching your phone on for the first 30 minutes or 1 hour after waking up and shutting it down an hour before bed, taking the cold shower on mornings that you don't want to because maybe you've just come out of a run in Boise, Idaho, and it's cold outside. But it gives you a sense of empowerment with that discipline that can then transcend into other areas of your life.
You're right. Focus, discipline, the ability to simply be able to put the constant bombarding and neurotransmitter depletion and vagus nerve confusion that occurs when we're just constantly on the go, and to be able to back off and have the discipline to be able to engage in those activities. It's a stoic approach to making your body better, because you could say that, for example, and you're no doubt aware in the health and fitness movement, there's this growing infatuation with ayahuasca and psilocybin and microdosing and LSD and all these things that somehow allow us to dissolve our ego and enhance our cognition. And you simply take a pill, or you use a tincture, and it does the work for you. But I think nobody should be doing that or has the business doing that unless they've also learned how to fast, perhaps even gone off into the wilderness for 2 or 3 days with just a few books and no phone and no MP3 player and no laptop, and learned how to discover themselves through silence and solitude and meditation and depletion and a stoic approach, to ego dissolution and finding yourself. And the same could be said of heat or cold, right? Like, it takes discipline, but that's what makes you better. And I think all too often we turn to either stepping onto the treadmill or waltzing into the gym or taking a supplement or taking a nootropic or taking a plant-based medicine before we've learned the more stoic, quiet approach to be able to making our bodies or our brains better.
Yeah, you're right. It's funny that you mentioned about the ayahuasca. You'll know 6 times Mr. Dorian Yates. He has actually transitioned into doing these ayahuasca journeys. And he does it the proper way in Costa Rica with a couple of shaman. He's actually hosting one this year, and he's asked me to go. But the next part of my path is definitely a spiritual one. That's what I want to do. I want to practice gratitude. I want to meditate. Guided meditation seems to work for me better than anything else. And that's what I would suggest that people experience first, as opposed to, like you said, going on an ayahuasca journey. I'm not ready for that.
Breath work.
Yeah.
Prana. Mm-hmm. You can, via a session of holotropic breath work, and I do this. I lay on my back in my sauna, and I've got an hour-long sequence that I do that brings me to a complete state of ego dissolution, and I get this natural high and this release of DMT from the pineal gland that rivals. I've done it all. I've done ayahuasca and psilocybin and LSD and ketamine, and probably the only thing I haven't done is ibogaine and the injection, the combo, right? So there's very few plant medicines or journeys I haven't gone on, and I have to admit I'm kind of disillusioned with it. Like, part of me doesn't want to do those type of things anymore, frankly, because I see society becoming infatuated with them, and I'm realizing that people are using those as a lazy escape. You have to do the hard work first. Mm-hmm. It's the same with Instagram fitness celebrities, right? There's few of them that I respect, aside from the ones who have actually worked in the industry, right? Worked as strength and conditioning coaches at universities, or run their own personal training gyms, or who know how to freaking do a functional movement screen, right? Like, there's so many people in the fitness sector now who are complete jokes, who haven't put in the hard work first, right? They've taken the shortcut. They've got a nice body, and they do Instagram photos, and they post their workouts, but there's no actual hard work put in to learn how a person moves, how they respond, the unique biochemical and biomechanic individuality of different body shapes and body types. I mean, there's a lot you got to learn to really be able to dispel helpful, non-damaging fitness advice or nutrition advice. And in the same way, I mean, again, I really don't think you have much business messing around with plant medicine until you have a good meditation practice, a good fasting practice. You've nailed all the spiritual disciplines. You're able to dissolve your ego with your breath work and with focus and with meditation. Yeah, then maybe the icing on the cake. Just like the icing on the cake of a natural movement lifestyle would involve an exercise session at the end of the day, the icing on the cake for something like spiritual disciplines would then be the introduction of plant-based medicines. But you can't put the cart before the horse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go for the low-hanging fruit first. And people will do that quite often. They'll look at a supplement, a certain dietary protocol, and think that is going to be the route. But I know for a fact that there's a lot of ground base that you go through first when you're taking on a client. Everyone's maybe taking their blood panel, a food allergy test, various types of tests. So if somebody, like I said, you've got a bodybuilder, and they want to pack on as much muscle as they possibly can, but they can't always take a cookie cutter route to it. What's going to work for this general population is not going to work for this population. And I know there's so many different tests, whether it be an ancestral test, microbiome. Well, I know there's just collecting data at the moment. What would be the top 2, maybe 3 tests, or the top 3 things that you get a client to do first for you in order for you to better accumulate a lifestyle, a nutrition, a training protocol?
Yeah, how do you personalize? And you are correct. Many of these tests, such as the microbiome data, they're spitting out interesting information that doesn't necessarily have a lot of human clinical data behind it when the recommendations are made. Like, whatever, you're low in this strain and species, like Lactobacillus reuteri, therefore you should take Lactobacillus reuteri as a probiotic supplement. That makes logical sense, but there's not a lot of actual research behind a claim like that. So yeah, the microbiome data is interesting, but it's not highly actionable at this point. However, there are other tests that I think give you a great deal of data. Some of the biggies that I use with my clients There is a test by Genova Diagnostics called urinary amino acids test. It involves both blood and urine. It needs to be ordered by a physician, but it gives you a host of data on micronutrients, amino acids, fatty acids, byproducts of yeast and fungal metabolism, just a whole host of little rabbit holes that you don't get from something like a complete blood panel. So I usually recommend that test to kind of be done in conjunction with a very good complete blood panel. Like not just your normal comprehensive metabolic panel or a complete blood count, but like a full lipid panel that shows you all your particles and particle sizes and LP little a and LDL and HDL and triglycerides and LDLP and just all of the lipids. So you really truly know more than just HDL, LDL, triglycerides. The same could be said for thyroid. You could get a TSH, or you could look at TSH, you could look at T3, T4, thyroid antibodies, reverse T3, and you can begin to see a clearer picture rather than just, I'm hypothyroid or I have low thyroid activity. Well, is that because there's inadequate T4 to T3 conversion? Is it because there's a large number of thyroid antibodies, so maybe it's an autoimmune issue? Is it because there's a lot of reverse T3, so maybe it's a cortisol type of issue? So you can begin to take a deeper dive when you get a comprehensive blood panel. Selfishly enough, I worked with a company called Wellness FX. We created something called the Greenfield Longevity Panel. That's one example. It's not the only comprehensive panel out there, but the basic takeaway message is do more than the average, MD is gonna do. A lot of functional medicine practitioners, or what are called integrative medical practitioners, they'll do these more complete blood panels. So you want a complete blood panel. You want preferably to do some kind of like a Genova Diagnostics amino acid urine profile. And then the other things that blood and that other profile from Genova doesn't catch would be gut, or like parasites, yeast, fungus, gastric inflammation, etc. And some of those microbiome panels like Viome or Longevity, they'll give you a little bit of that data, but I still use a very simple 3-day stool panel. There's a few different companies that do it, like Health Diagnostics or Genova, but you just order the kit to your house, you swab with toilet paper or put a little stool into a tube, and then at the end of 3 days you mail that off, and you get a PDF a couple of weeks later that tells you inflammation markers in the gut, whether you have parasites, whether you have C. difficile or H. pylori, or all those things that involve the gut that a blood panel will not test for. And then probably the only other two things I would name in addition to blood, like a micronutrient panel and the stool test, would be salivary genetic profile. So you can see what your ancestors ate, whether you have the gene that allows you to make vitamin D from sunlight or whether you need to supplement with vitamin D, whether you are a good methylator or whether you're a poor methylator and you need to take a multivitamin that's got methyl tetrahydrofolate in it, whether you are a fast coffee oxidizer or a slow coffee oxidizer, which would dictate the amount of caffeine consumption that you would take in during the day. All sorts of interesting things that you can learn that allow you to make slight lifestyle modifications, and even if you would like to eat like your ancestors. There are great books out there that teach you how to eat like your ancestors, like The Jungle Effect by Dr. Daphne Miller, or Returning to an Ancestral Diet by Dr. Michael Smith, or The 100-Year Diet by Dr. Stephen Lee. And these are perfect examples. Those three books I love because they really teach you how to look at what your ancestors ate and how to simulate that in a modern post-industrial environment of Whole Foods and Trader Joe's and Rosar's and Safeway. So you've got your genetic panel. And then finally, a good food allergy panel. Something that's not going to give you a laundry list of false positives and the 800 foods you're not supposed to eat, like an ELISA or an ALCAT test. Many of these tests, they look at antibodies circulating in your bloodstream that can be elevated to certain foods that are elevated simply because you eat a lot of those foods. So many people do these tests and they find out, oh, shit, I'm allergic to eggs. And eggs are like this huge staple in my diet. Well, you're allergic to eggs because you eat a lot of eggs and you have some antibodies circulating in your bloodstream in response to those eggs. Or they'll test your blood cell reaction, your white blood cell reaction to say like chicken, and you'll find out you're allergic to chicken. Well, they test the white blood cell reaction to raw chicken, not cooked chicken. And it's pretty normal and natural for a human body to mount a little bit of an autoimmune response to raw meat versus cooked meat. So a lot of these tests are not that great.
So what would you suggest then?
I like a company called Cyrex, Cyrex, and if you go and you go through their work and the research that they've done, that's where I send most of my clients for a food allergy panel, because it doesn't give you a laundry list of false positives. It tells you just the things that are that they have a true allergic reaction to, because they use a lot of third-party laboratories. They test the raw version of the protein, the cooked version of the protein. They retest multiple times to make sure there's no false positives arising. So coming full circle, you get some kind of micronutrient panel. I like the Genova Diagnostics. They call it the amino acids, the 40 amino acids profile, they call it. Some complete blood panel, like the longevity profile from Wellness FX. Some complete gut panel, like the Genova Diagnostics or Diagnostics Health 3-day gut panel. A genetic test, like a 23andMe, for example. And then finally a food allergy panel. The last thing I would throw in there is, with the genetic test, 23andMe won't release a lot of the health data, but you can download your raw results from 23andMe. There's a wonderful website called 23andU.com that has a list of all the websites that will interpret your genetic data for you and allow you to take a much deeper dive into what everything means. And there are even practitioners, a few good ones that I really respect, who will help you make sense of your genetic data and personalize your diet, your lifestyle, your exercise program based on your genetics. For example, Dr. Ben Lynch with his service Strategene is very good. Dr. Bob Miller with Tree of Life is very good. Dr. Karim Danani with Nutrients up in Canada, he's very good. So there's a small subset of practitioners who kind of specialize in taking that genetic data and helping you to make good sense of it.
All right. Well, after you spew and all that, there's one thing that impresses me, when you're just conversing with me right now, is that how you're able to retain so much of this content. You just throw off people's names, you remember all, the doctors' names and their books and whatever. Have you always been like this, where you've been able to retain content, or is it content that fascinates you so much that you're able to retain it, or have you done something in regards to neuroplasticity or nootropics or anything like that that helps you function, not just from a physical standpoint, but from a mental standpoint as well? How do you hack your brain?
I microdose with a lot of LSD, bro.
LSD?
That's a trick. Lots of nootropics and smart drugs. No, a few things. First of all, anyone who's read like Arthur Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes might know when Sherlock Holmes meets Watson and says, I'll remember to forget your name, Watson, because he doesn't want those facts cluttering up his head, because all he wants to specialize in is sleuthing and detective work. I'm very similar. I focus pretty hardcore on health, fitness, and nutrition. I don't watch a lot of TV. I tune out to politics. All through college, I'd read the Wall Street Journal and USA Today and the New York Times, and just fancied myself as the Renaissance man who knew everything about everything. But I think that ultimately that was kind of a mistake. It detracts from your ability to be able to specialize in what you really want to specialize in. So when it comes to knowledge, I really focus hardcore on health, fitness, nutrition. I try not to get too carried away with politics, blockchain, pop culture, etc. I'm a complete dummy when it comes to a lot of that stuff. I've just made the decision that despite it being beneficial to know what Trump is up to, I would just rather focus on helping people get healthy and know what to eat or how to exercise or whatever the case may be. So I stay very focused in my specific sector. I take good care of my brain, right? Like I do all the things that increase your brain-derived neurotrophic factor. I am in the sauna several times per week. I go on long walks in the sunshine. A lot of the things we were talking about earlier, I make it a point to learn new things. So for me, that's usually some form of music, like learning a new song on the ukulele or the guitar or the harmonica. Reading fiction. I'm a big fan of reading fiction. I also write fiction, which kind of allows me to tap into my more creative side. I meditate, which also increases your brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and I'm very careful with things that would cause damage to the blood-brain barrier or exhaust my neurotransmitters, excess sensory stimuli. scary movies, loud music. A lot of the people might think that's silly, but I mean, if you're constantly flooding your synaptic clefts with dopamine and serotonin and excitatory neurotransmitters because you're go, 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 in many cases when it's time to actually get your brain to perform, you feel like you have to have a cup of coffee or a smart drug or some, pump me up song to be able to get through your workout or whatever the case may be. So I'm very careful with excess stimulation of my excitatory neurotransmitters. When it comes to the blood-brain barrier, that comes down to taking excellent care of your gut. Like I do bone broth, and I take colostrum, and I avoid vegetable oils, and I'm particularly careful with lipopolysaccharides, these are toxins that they very significantly can affect your blood-brain barrier, and they're brought on usually by high-fat, high-sugar foods, like very palatable, westernized foods. But even like if I go to a steakhouse, right, I know I'm going to be eating a very fat, calorie-dense piece of ribeye steak. So when they bring out the bread basket, I'm very careful with that. I don't have a sugary cocktail. If the steak is served over a mash of potato, I'll substitute roasted vegetables, or instead of doing the pretzel bread, when they bring out the bread at the steakhouse, I'll ask if they can bring mushrooms or Brussels sprouts. And so I'm always thinking about whether or not I'm combining a high fat food with a high sugar food, because that's how you create these lipopolysaccharides. And it's very simple to, pizza and ice cream and Hot Pockets certainly get you that. But even if you're eating healthy, if you go to whatever Erewhon and you're getting some wild salmon and some carrots with some avocado, then maybe skip the raw cake afterwards. It's going to dump the sugar in with the fat. So that's something else I'm very cognizant of.
Do you try to make less choices in the morning as well, so you pretty much know you've got a similar wardrobe? Because I've heard things like that as well.
Decision-making fatigue, yeah. I don't do that as much. No, I'm not a wear one single outfit kind of guy, because frankly, I like clothes. I like to try a new shirt or try a new pair of pants, or to put on. Plus, I'm in the blessed position where, as a an Instagram guy and a blogger and a podcaster, people just send me cool clothes to try, and I like to wear them. So no, I don't do a lot of that, but I do live in a very decluttered environment. We don't own a lot of things. Our house is very open. The only thing that litters the house everywhere are books, and that would be the final thing I should note, is that I read a lot, and reading is a muscle. I read nearly a book a day, but I'm able to do it very quickly because I've trained my body to be able to do that for a very long time. I mean, ever since I was 6 years old, I'd hang out in the library and being bricks home from school and lay in bed till 2 a.m. and at any given point, I've got some kind of a book in my bag or on my Kindle, where when I'm waiting for an Uber on the street side, I'm going through a chapter, or when I'm waiting for a chiropractic adjustment, I'm standing there thumbing through my Kindle. I am constantly digesting information, and I feel like the more that you do that, the more your brain becomes able to handle and process that information.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there are a lot of things I do, but I mean, to come full circle, it returns to a lot of things I recommend for people for their mitochondria and their fitness. Good air, good water, good light, good electricity, heat, cold. A lot of these things are fantastic for cognition, just as they are for the mitochondria and for physical performance.
Yeah, that's what I noticed when I followed the cyclical keto diet last year. I found that I didn't wake up with the morning fog because I'd fasted as well, and during the afternoon I didn't get the crash. Of course, for the first couple of days, you feel hungry, but again, it's just another sense of empowerment and discipline that you apply, and it's amazing what you can feel, not just physically, but mentally as well. Let's just go on to one more. I am going to scatter all over the place here, and I've pretty much finished with you because I know that you've got to get out, and we probably got to get out of this room as well. But there's just so much that I'd love to delve in here. One thing, you live out there, out in the boonies a little. I grew up on a farm, and I'm always concerned as well about, the radiation, especially, when we travel a lot, and the 5G that is coming around the corner. So based on all your travel and the travel that I'm doing as well, I try to do whatever I can, a lot that I've learned from you, making sure that I'm grounding myself, find a grassy patch or whatever, wearing the blue light blocking glasses, fasting, whatever it may be. When it comes to your travel, whether you're going to the East Coast or West Coast or Southern Hemisphere, Northern Hemisphere, does it change at all? Do you change the protocol dependent on where you're traveling?
You mean west to east versus east to west?
Yeah.
I do not. There are some people that suggest that, for example, when you're going west to east, you should use melatonin, and when you're going east to west, that you don't need melatonin. There are some people that will say when you get whatever, when you're traveling from west to east, keep yourself awake for as long as possible on the airplane and then sleep when you get to where you're going. I don't do a lot of that. I catch up on sleep as much as I can on the airplane. I fast quite a bit when I'm going through airports and on the airplane, and I focused on what they call Zeitgebers, and I know time is limited, but I'll give you a very brief explanation of what I mean by that. The primary circadian cues for the body are light, movement, and food. Light, movement, and food. So whenever I get to where I'm going, I make sure that I expose myself to as much natural light as possible when it's morning wherever I happen to be. And if it's cloudy out, or I'm in a conference, or I'm in freaking Vegas where it's very hard to get outside because of the way they've architected that city, I'll use light producing devices like a human charger or these glasses called retimers that allow me to blast myself with light when it's morning. So I use light. I use food, meaning that whenever I land, wherever I am, I wait until whatever the next main meal in that area of the world is, whether it's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So if I land in Tokyo at 3 p.m., no matter how hungry I am coming off that airplane in a fasted state, I wait till 6 or 7 p.m. dinner to actually eat dinner in the time zone that I happen to be in. And the same can be said for breakfast when I get home, right? Like if I get home at 10 p.m., my flight comes in, I'm just going to sleep fasted, wake up, and have breakfast as my first big meal of the day. And then finally, movement. I'm a huge fan of slipping off the shoes, walking outside in the sunshine. Swimming does very well for me as far as managing jet lag, finding a nice clean body of water, going for a swim, doing a yoga session, some kind of passive movement, and making sure you don't skip the movement, especially on the first day that you happen to be wherever you're going. So try and play with light, food, and movement, and those are the biggest wins for me when it comes to travel.
Okay, all right. So lastly, one of the things that I've taken from you, like about 5 years ago, I was in a place, Dr. Spinal's clinic, because I was dealing with a lot of sleep issues. I was only sleeping around 3 hours a night. I've hacked my sleep. I quantify it. I feel so much better today with various practices. One of the practices I was doing there was colonic hydrotherapy. But what I've done over the past 8-10 months or so was the coffee enemas. Been doing that once a week with the Kion coffee. Great in both orifices.
Good job. Don't shove Folgers up your butt.
Yeah, no Folgers, no contaminants just yet. But the Kion, I love the Kion. So people who don't know, Ben, you founded Kion, the supplement company, and got a fantastic coffee that I love there as well. Now, being somebody who is eating, or a viewer listening that is eating 5-6 meals a day because they live the bodybuilding lifestyle, is something like a coffee enema going to be beneficial to them as well? Of course, helping with inflammatory response of the liver, but what about for digestive health?
I'll be pretty brief because I've got another meeting across town I got to get to, but I'm going to give you the quick lowdown.
Sure.
Coffee enemas induce peristalsis, movement of food through the digestive tract, and they also very significantly increase the release of bile by your gallbladder. So they can improve digestion dramatically, especially for somebody who tends to get gummed up, who's eating a lot of food stuff, who tends to deal with constipation, etc. Because of the health benefits of a coffee enema, I do one once a week. I do have friends. I know one guy who's a bodybuilder, Kris. He does one every day. There are also these suppositories you can travel with called glytamins, and that's like a mobile version of a coffee enema. That's just a suppository that you insert and leave in for 30 minutes while you're doing your morning routine or whatever, and then have your bowel movement afterwards. So there's a few different ways to skin that cat, but they're fantastic for the body, and there's a reason that they're kind of a staple of, for example, Ayurvedic medicine when it comes to the cleansing aspect of them. They're uncomfortable. It's a weird topic for a lot of people, but they do indeed work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel clean as a whistle.
Yeah,
after.
Me too.
All right, well, thank you very much, Ben. And if anybody is interested in checking out Kion and the Kion coffee, put it up your butt, you can actually get a 10% off by putting in the code KAGED, muscle, Cage Muscle 10, at the checkout for 10% off. Ben Greenfield, thank you very much for joining me, sir. I
Thank
appreciate
you
your
for
time.
recommending to the world that they put my coffee up their butt.
Anytime.
Thanks, man.
All right, thank you.